All right, guys, so we got to talk about a story that really is very eye-opening when it comes to the whole issue of trans people competing in sports, because the left tries to say that trans people are banned from competing in sports just because they can't compete against people of the opposite sex. Mainly biological men can't compete against biological women. Now, again, this is ridiculous. Nobody's banning transgender athletes from competing in sports. Basically, we're saying, look, you have to compete based off your sex at birth because that is fair. Okay, that is the fair thing to do. But again, the left boohoo, whines, and cries and claim that this is discrimination. Okay, so people like me who advocate for common sense solutions have basically said, look, we need to have athletes competing based off biological sex, but, we can have an open category, right? Or we can have a category where transgender athletes compete against themselves, and maybe they'll be happy, right? They should be happy with that. That's fair, okay? Now, the left routinely rejects this, okay? They rather say that trans athletes are banned rather than to actually really just acknowledge the truth, which is that they're not banned. They just have to compete based off their sex or amongst themselves. But the reality is that they don't want to compete amongst themselves, right? They don't want to compete in an arena that, in my opinion, is fair. And we have some proof of that because we got to talk about a story that kind of flew under the radar, but I want to talk about it here real quick, involving World Aquatics and their plan to debut an open category for transgender athletes at the World Cup in Berlin this week that have been canceled because no trans athletes signed up. Now, again, this is after the World Aquatics decision to ban transgender women from elite female competitions, right? If they have undergone male puberty, they can't compete, right? They cannot compete against the opposite sex. So they decided, you know what? We want to have an open category where, trans people can compete amongst themselves. And lo and behold, none of them signed up. Okay. Which, again, should send a very strong but clear message about all of this. Right. So without further ado, I want to react to this news clip here from Fox Business and then get into it.
Races for transgender swimmers have been scrapped after no entries were received. It was supposed to take place at the World Cup in Berlin. Former NCAA swimmer Caitlin Wheeler joins me now. Let me see if I've got this right, Caitlin. They have these swim meet. They have a special category for trans athletes, and nobody showed up. I think I've got that right. You tell me what that tells you.
Of course they failed to get entries in for the meet. What man wouldn't want to compete against other men when they compete in the women's sports and dominate? Men have larger heart muscles, they have higher bone density, they have higher testosterone levels, giving them an advantage. Let's look at what happened in Maine. There was a 16-year-old male who was ranked 172nd in the men's and started competing in the women's and is now ranked 4th. This just shows that there is an unfair advantage here. They're not here to make it fair, they're here to dominate.
But one of the solutions to this problem was that you have a special category where trans athletes compete amongst themselves. That doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's not going to be satisfactory. They don't want a third category. That's not going to satisfy what they're looking for. Men want to invade women's sports. They're erasing women and destroying women's sports. Having a third category isn't going to solve anything at all.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, okay? Again, this is very telling, okay? Because for me personally, right, I don't want anybody to feel discriminated against, okay? And when you go out of your way to truly make it fair, and then you have people reject what everybody should be happy with, right? An actual solution. Again, that tells you everything you need to know about the type of people that you're dealing with in regards to whether or not they want to come to an actual solution that's fair for everybody, right? Because again, the third category, the open category, basically gives transgender people everything that they should want, right? Okay, no, you can compete in a category in which you can compete fairly among other transgender athletes, other people who, again, identify as trans or whatever. And that should have been something that they were excited about, right? They should have been waving their flag and saying, hey, this is great for us. This is progress. But again, nobody signed up, not because there's not any transgender swimmers, but simply because as a show of protest saying that, no, this is not enough. We have to be able to compete against the opposite sex or, we're just not going to show up at all. Because like all the other so-called social justice movements in the West, it's not about equal rights. It's not about getting fair treatment. It's about special rights and special treatment, okay? This is what a lot of the woke activists want. This is what they want, okay? When you look at the issue of bathrooms and locker rooms, no. It's not enough to have just a gender-neutral bathroom where, if you're trans or whatever, hey, you can go into a gender-neutral place, and do your thing, right? No, that's not good enough, okay? You have to be able to use the bathroom associated with the opposite sex, or else there's some form of discrimination. And again, it's truly incredible. It really is. And it's not acceptable for us to allow men and women to compete against each other in sports. So, it just goes to show that realistically, there is no middle ground solution here, because there's one side that's just not interested in coming to a middle ground solution. They want all or nothing. And if it's all or nothing, then at the end of the day, I guess, some of these trans athletes that feel like they're being banned, they just got to ban themselves, right? Because that's essentially what is happening at this point, right? If they don't want to accept an open category where trans people can compete amongst themselves, then again, they're essentially banning themselves, right? They're going to boohoo on and cry and say, oh, they're being discriminated against. It's like, nah, you had an opportunity. But like I told you guys, I'm not surprised that it doesn't work, that they're rejecting it, because at the end of the day, one of the main reasons why they don't want a third category is because they're afraid that nobody's going to support it, right? So, for example, when it comes to women's basketball, the left claim they, support women's rights so much, except on this issue right here, but they claim they support women's rights so much, but yet look at the WNBA, right? They don't support the WNBA enough for them to get equal pay, right? But they're always jumping up and down, boohoo, whining and crying about women not getting equal pay. But the reason why the women aren't getting equal pay is because the liberals don't like women's basketball as much as you would think they would like women's basketball, considering how much virtue signaling they do, right? They like the virtue signal a lot more about the gender pay gap and how bad the patriarchy is, rather than to actually put their money where their mouth is and support the WNBA. Again, I think that there's the same thing going on here, right? I think that there is probably some hesitancy to have an open category because, again, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to sign up to watch it, right? Or that are going to openly support it. And I think that's also part of the reason why you're seeing that, there's a refusal to actually go along with what, in my opinion, is the real solution, which is to have an open category outside of the regular men and women. That way, anybody who wants to compete against men and women, hey, if y'all want to compete amongst other sexes, great, right? It is what it is. Do you? But again, for whatever reason, it seems like this is not what they want. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.